Paying the toll as the frog cross the road. There's a witch eating souls. There's a dish being filled, and my leg froze. Yeah, it still has a cause, but I'll always love when you purr. And September rains when I can't feel a thing, but my God, I love when you purr. People are mean, but that's part of the sting, and I say what I mean, but it's...
Hey everybody, welcome back. So tonight I'm going on a ghost tour. My friend Rob, he hosts that tour, so we're going to go take that tonight, kind of go around town, visit some little haunted spots in town. I believe we start off at the Kelly House, or into the Kelly House, one of the two. We'll find out. So yeah, he's invited me along tonight, so I'm going to go ahead and film that, and take you guys along with me. Let's check it out.
The Kelly House was built for William Kelly in 1861. I heard this really great story about William Kelly recently that I want to share with you guys. So William Kelly's brother died of cholera, okay? William Kelly himself had cholera and knew that it wasn't likely he was going to survive. He was really nervous about this because he was distracted. His brother died and he was really upset by it. Had the same doctor. His brother had the same doctor. So he was like, this is not going to go well. So he had $2,000 in cash, which in 1860s was a lot of money. He hid that money in the chimney in his room. And he said, look, you don't want me to die, okay? If you die, you're not getting any money from me because I hid it. However, if I live, all that money is yours.
To the doctor or like his family? To
the doctor. He said that to the doctor. And he lived. So the doctor was $2,000 richer. At any rate, the Kellys lived here. So it was William Kelly and his wife and his daughter and son. And there are a couple other stories. William Kelly was a businessman. He had his hands in a lot of businesses. He had general stores, he had saloons, he had a skating rink, because there's money in skating, and livery stables. And so he was pretty well off. Now, they lived in this house for quite a while. His daughter Daisy got married, and he had the house built for her across the street as a wedding gift. So Daisy McCallum is up in the McCallum House, which we'll end up going to on this tour. So some of the ghost stories in this house, well, they're nonstop. Like, let me tell you. So the most recent story was about 7 or 8 days ago. The museum curator was here by herself. She was moving things from downstairs to upstairs, or from upstairs to downstairs. She was in one of the bedrooms where Daisy Kelly there's a dress on the mannequin. And this dress on the mannequin is kind of stashed in the corner a little bit. So the curator's going back and forth. She comes back up, and it's no longer in the corner. It's standing right in front of the window, facing out. She ran downstairs. She told him, I'm done for the week. I don't need to come back till Monday, and when I do, somebody else will be here with me. So she hustled. But at any rate, that's the most recent story. And we're going to go into that room to take a look around a little bit. So first I want to ask questions. Who believes in ghosts? Okay. We got to convince her. She's the so, and who has their own ghost stories? Very cool. So I'm hoping that along this tour, I get to share with you my ghost stories, but you're going to share with me yours. Is that cool? Okay. Docents have said that they've heard footsteps or children running up and down the hall. Okay. Children laughing. The sound of balls or wagons rolling up and down the hallway. And there's nobody else here. Like the Dosen will come in the morning and they gotta do their stuff before they can open the door to let people in. That's when they hear it. There have also been stories of lights. These lights here are on a dimmer switch. They can go on or off, or they can go up or down. And they're known to go up or down until you notice it, and then they stop. Like, you're like, wait, that light's moved. And then you stop, and you look, and it stays still until you relax, and then it starts again. So that's just one of the things. Now, the children laughing and playing, that was something that happened back in the day. Because William Kelly had, he had grandchildren. He had, Daisy had a son, Donald, and she had a daughter as well, and they played here a lot. They lived across the street, so they'd come to their grandparents' house. There's a room up there that's filled with dolls. And one of the things that happens is the dolls always end up in a different position.
Oh, no.
Always the dolls.
Yeah. And sometimes dolls will go missing. And then they will return.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Somebody's home, private residence. So this house used to be what was called the Didgeridoo. It was an inn. It was purchased not too long ago from the Colsons, I think. Coleslaw is kind of a tongue-in-cheek.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
kind of a tongue-in-cheek. But the house is definitely haunted. This is the doctor's house. It was built by the first doctor in Mendocino and sold to 3 subsequent doctors from there on. So it is known as the doctor's house because that's who lives there, right? The doctors. Now, the upper left-hand room, okay, is the one that's supposed to be haunted the most. That room is haunted by someone called Janet, and I don't know how they know her name, but that is her name. Apparently, she was the wife of a sailor. And the sailor never returned, so
Why did she live at the doctor's house, though?
Well, this is after, I guess, it was the doctor.
Okay.
I can tell you that there were a lot of sick people here, being a doctor's house. It was also a clinic. The back units are haunted by children, victims of tuberculosis. Yeah. So there is some sadness in the haunting here. Now, Janet is apparently sad, but there's another spirit who has been known as a happy and helpful spirit. One who finds lost objects, puts them, in places where obviously they weren't. You could spend all day looking for something, and then there it is right on the table. So what they have said was that there is some feeling of happiness here, some feeling of nurturing, and that makes sense since it was a doctor, somebody who wanted to take care of people. This house, a couple tours ago, I had a couple with me, and they were here on their honeymoon, and not their honeymoon, sorry, their first anniversary. They had come here on their honeymoon to stay. And when they heard there was a haunted tour in Mendocino, they're like, I bet the house that we stayed in is haunted. Let's go on that tour. And so, of course, we stopped here, and they're just so excited. They were just jazzed. And they're like, so which room is it? And I said, it's the upper left. Oh, we stayed in the upper right. So, but the truth is, it is haunted. They're currently are fixing it up. Hopefully it'll be coming in. I mean, that would be nice. right, so this is the Presbyterian Church. And I mentioned earlier about musical instruments that play by themselves. That organ right there. So here's something that happened on one of my earlier tours. I had a group of 30 people, and they're all sitting out here in these seats. And while I'm talking, telling them about the ghost story of this building, everybody suddenly looks at the organ. And I didn't know what they were doing, because I didn't hear anything. But they all heard the organ play a note. One note. And my wife was in the crowd, and she was like, it played by itself. And everybody else was like, oh yeah, it totally played. So I didn't hear it. I went out the front door, which is back here, with everybody. We finished the tour. I came back to make sure the church was all locked up. And I have to walk through this door to that door. And while I was doing it, the organ played a note. And I hustled. Like I ran to the door. I shouldn't say I ran. I kind of jogged to the door, made sure it was locked and bolted up, and I jogged back. And the car was already running, and I get in the car and I close the door and I just sat there for a minute. My wife's like, what's the matter? I go, I heard it. Now, we are here because Pastor Matt Davis, who runs this church, was gracious enough, he's a friend of mine, gracious enough to let us in. And he, for the longest time, was like, Rob, you got to do a ghost story at the church. And I'm like, Matt, there's no ghost stories at the church. He goes, there has to be some. Well, I did a lot of research. At the Kelly House, I've got all these materials. I've got newspaper articles and all kinds of stuff. So I found some stories. I didn't want to tell Matt about the organ. You know, first of all, he's a Presbyterian pastor. I'm like, does he want to know about ghost happenings in his church? I mean, obviously, right? He told me to come here and tell ghost stories. So finally I told him, I said, hey, Matt, we were in there and that organ played a note. And he goes, what? I said, I know. Isn't that weird? Because it's covered. He goes, no, it's electric. It's unplugged. So, yeah, they don't leave it plugged in. It's, electricity. So some of the ghost stories here go way back. And now, sometimes on a foggy night, and this first story, I think the oldest documented case was in the 60s. And then it happened several times after that. And I think the next one I found was probably in I think it was 1989. But there were some people who were coming from the headlands, and it was foggy and late at night, and they see a guy walking with a big brimmed hat and a cane with a white head. And he's circling the church. And he's looking around, and he's circling the church. And then they don't see him anymore. And then the church bells ring. And at a weird hour at night, you don't expect the church bells to ring. So the church bells, this bell is from 1870. And it still rings every Sunday. And at weird times at night sometimes. Now, finding that story, I'm like, I need to find out who this fella is. So I did a lot of research. I found another story where somebody saw him standing on the steps outside the front door. And again, this was late at night. A couple was coming up from the beach. He's standing there with his cane and his hat. And they kind of laughed and joked and looked at each other and said, wouldn't it be funny? I mean, he's dressed like he's old-timey. Maybe he's a ghost. And they looked back up and he was gone. Nobody opened the doors, but then the bell started ringing. So that's the story there. I talked to a man who said, well, it could be a couple different things. And he named somebody who I'll talk about in a minute. But one thing I did find in my research was a man by the name of Peter Kelly. Now, Peter Kelly is William Kelly's father, okay? And he was an elder at the Presbyterian Church. He lived from 1786 to 1865. I told you this church was built in 1868. So he died before the church was built. However, he did petition to have this church built, and he pushed really hard to have a foundation, a Presbyterian church with walls, as opposed to meeting in a barn someplace or wherever they could to have their services, which is what they ended up doing for a long time. So they finally did get this church built, again, 3 years after he died. And I found this picture of Peter Kelly. You see what he's holding there? He in that picture, he has a cane with a white head. I found other pictures of him that are hard to tell that it's him, but they're old, kind of grainy. But he has on a big brimmed hat. So I found who I think is the ghost of Presbyterian Church, and he's ringing the bell because he got this church built.
Because he can.
Because he can. Now the bell in the back. I don't know if any of you know the history of this bell or the rope that hangs from it. It's called the reap rope. Okay, we'll take a look at the bell on our way out because we're going to go out that door there. So the reap rope is named for Harold Reap, and he was a deacon here for 60 years, and he rang the bell for 30 of those 60 years. He was a bell ringer for 30 plus years. He was an all-around nice guy. Everybody loved him. He also had apple orchards, so he grew a lot of apples, and he would give apples to people. And he would drive great distances to deliver crates of apples to folks. So one night, and he was here, he shut up the church, he got in his truck filled with apples, and he drove Highway 128 to go deliver some apples to somebody. It was a rainy night, and he slid off the cliff, and he crashed and died. That night, the bell rang. So it's a possibility that Harold Reap. However, I think the bell was ringing before Harold Reap died. So maybe Harold plays the organ.
See, you got heart?
Yeah, just yank it. You don't even have to. There you go. All right. This is the Ford House, and the Ford House, of course, is one of the first homes built in Mendocino. It's currently the visitor center, run by State Parks, and I've heard some really great ghost stories here. Now, this house was built for Jerome Ford and Martha Ford, his wife. The guy that designed this house had a really interesting design. And he did this with all the homes he built. He built the kitchen downstairs in the basement, which seems ridiculous to me, but at any rate, Jerome had the house built. His fiancée was to come meet him. She died. Because, back then it was just hard to live. A lot of illness, right? So she died. And he married her sister and brought her out here instead. Because, that's what you do, I guess. Yeah, keep it in the family. Of course, the sister was very sad a lot. She lost a sister. She had to move away from her home. And there was, again, just a lot of loss here. So Martha is the sister that he married. And when she got here, she hated the house because the kitchen was in the basement, and she was a fantastic, strong-willed, independent woman. Like, what the hell is the kitchen doing in the basement? Are you trying to put me in the basement to cook your dinner? As it turned out, it's because heat rises up, and that was really the best way to heat the home. So this architect did this several homes, and he built several around here. This house currently has 3 kitchens because it's got the original kitchen downstairs, it's got the kitchen on the main floor that the staff uses, and there's a kitchen upstairs because at some point during its history it was turned into apartments. So the people who lived upstairs had to have their own kitchen. Now, Martha, again, as I said, was often very sad. I'll tell you the story. She often would look out one of the windows at the ocean. Now, there's a handful of stories where spirits are looking out at the ocean for various reasons. Sometimes it's, again, waiting for your sailor to return, and he doesn't, right? For her, it was a way that she would just stand there and stare out the window. Now, one of the ghost stories here is that at night, the staff, you'll see the curtains on this window, how they're clipped back, okay, so that the curtains are open. Every night, the staff clips before they leave. They make sure all the curtains are clipped open, and every morning when they return, if you look all the way through to the next window back there, there's one curtain that's not clipped usually, and I think it's the one at the very back of the house, like it's straight back. Although it might not be.
So that one too then?
Yeah. There it is. So let me take a look through this window. Yeah. So do you see through that window in the back? It's not open. It's shut. That curtain is shut. And that is the one that's usually clipped open. So every morning when they get here, the curtain is shut. And these aren't ropes that they tie loosely. These aren't hooks that they just loosely hook them on. It's actually a clip that fastens. Every morning when they come, they have to pull the curtain back again. And nobody knows why. Probably the most haunted place in Mendocino. And when you look at it, there's all kinds of history floating around, right? The art on the walls, the mirrors, the fireplace, it's all beautiful. This was built in 1877, and it was a temperance house. It is the only surviving hotel of the logging era, basically. Being a temperance house, it was a place where you couldn't drink, you couldn't do, you just couldn't do anything fun.
You mean checkers isn't fun?
What's that?
You mean checkers isn't fun?
Yeah. That said, I've had a lot of fun in this hotel. It's a fantastic place. So there are stories told here. A lot of times when we come in, I bring a tour. I'll often have a couple people sit right there. They'll just sit there, and it's a nice, cozy place. That mirror has had a lot of action. So,
yeah, I knew it. I was like, I'm not sitting there.
So there have been people looking into that mirror and seeing a woman standing behind it. Now, recently, I had a gentleman tell me a story about this mirror right here. Which I believe it's a coffee station there. He comes in the morning and he'll get himself a cup of coffee. And he said that he was pouring a cup of coffee and he looked up, and in that mirror there was a woman standing behind him who wore kind of it looked like a white nightgown. And she was an older woman. And then he said that she just kind of stood there staring at him. And he didn't think anything strange. He just thought like, what's with her, He turned around and she wasn't there. The woman sitting at the desk, and when he turned around and saw there was nobody there, he didn't say anything to that lady. They were talking and having a conversation, but he cut it off right in the middle of their conversation because he got so freaked out. He just left. He just walked out. What is a ghost? What is a spirit? Does anybody have any idea? There's got to be theories, right? Anybody have theories as to what a ghost or a spirit is? Residual energy, something that a spirit is maybe somebody who's passed who has like unfinished business. In this building, People have heard children, again, running up and down the hallways. There's been a case where somebody staying in the room has heard a four-legged animal going through the hall with like a collar that jingles, and even sniff under her door. And when she opened the door, there's nothing there. And animals weren't allowed in the building. So now here's a story. When I started writing the book, I came in and talked to a lady by the name of Dorothy Peer Green. And Dorothy had worked here for years, and she's passed now. She was older, really old when I talked to her. But we were having drinks at a table over by the window, and I was interviewing her. And while she's telling me all the ghost stories in this house, I see a couple come in, and they were famous actors. I recognized the man right away. It's Mendocino, so a lot of famous people come here for vacation, right? And she and I are talking, and I notice that he hears what we're saying. And he gets this look in his eye. And he comes over to me after I finished with Dorothy, and he said, are you doing a piece on this building? And I said, well, I'm working on a book. And he said, we're staying in one of the haunted rooms. He says, would you be interested in interviewing us when we get ready to leave? Maybe hear about our experience? And I'm like, yeah, that sounds cool. So he was checking out at the end of the weekend. I came back to meet with him, and I sat down at the table. He and his wife came up. He was excited. He was energized. And he said, I don't believe in ghosts. My wife believes in them, and she's really excited to be here, so I'm excited to be with her. They came up, and she did not look happy. She looked exhausted. She looked ill. She had this down look on her face, but he was just like, oh, this is great. I can't wait to tell him. So they sat down, and they told me the story. One night, and they'd already been here a night, they came in, and they went to their room, and they were getting ready for bed, and laid down, and she felt somebody climb onto the bed next to her. She felt the cushion go down, and then she felt hands on her chest. She couldn't move. She couldn't talk. She couldn't say anything. She couldn't even breathe really well. She was frozen. And he was just talking away and chatting about their day, and he looked over and he was like, are you okay? And she just kind of trembled a little bit. And he got gleeful. He was just, are you having an experience? And she wouldn't say anything, so he's like, what's happening? What's happening? Finally, she jumped up. She slaps him, hits him across the chest. And she's like, I couldn't move. It was on my chest. And she's breathing heavy. And she's like, it was holding me down. And so they didn't really sleep that night. But, he was pretty stoked to tell me about it because as far as a guy who doesn't believe in ghosts, this was a really cool story for him. And as for somebody who does, it was a miserable experience for her. So I felt really bad for her. So this is the Mallen House, and this, of course, was built, like I said, by William Kelly for his daughter Daisy for her wedding night. This was a wedding gift, and so Daisy McCallan lived here. Now, her son Donald lived his entire life in this house. I ask you what you think a ghost might be. And somebody says, well, it's oftentimes they're like, yeah, it's somebody who, after they die, there's some residual left over. But another question is, what form do they take? Do they take the form of what they were like when they died? Well, there's a ghost here that's believed to be Donald. And in Donald's room, seems to be haunted by a little boy. Donald lived here until he was an old man. So, who knows? Now, I've talked to people who've lived here, and one of the things that happened, there was a friend of mine who came here for her friend's wedding. They were getting married in town, and all the ladies stayed at the Mac house. So they had a bachelorette party here in the house. She said that doors were opening and closing in the middle of the night. Like somebody was just going in all the rooms and slamming the doors. And it kept her awake. So she'd go to her friend's room and say, what is going on? Her friend's like, nothing. Why are you waking me up? She was the only one that heard the doors open and close. There have also been water turned on full blast.
Was she in his room? Was she staying in his room?
She was not. Her friend was staying in Donald's room. And one of the hauntings here is, I often ask people, what are some of the characteristics of a haunting? Did anybody have any input? What are some of the general characteristics of a haunting? Footsteps, noises,
Things being moved around.
things being moved around. How about
Cold
smells?
air. Smells.
Yeah, cigar smoke.
It's like cold.
Yeah, yeah. So here's one, okay? The smell of rotting meat, followed by the smell of roses. And when you think about it, so Donald was often sick as a child and often bedridden. And he was in bed a lot of time. He got bed sores. And so he smelled bad because he was basically in bed rotting away. So they would bring roses in and rose oil to freshen up the scent in the bedroom so it didn't stink. So when you smell what smells like rotting meat followed by roses, that is a nasty haunting. But the friend of mine who heard noises, the lights turning on and off, the doors opening, the water turning on, that's one of the things that her friends discovered in that room. And that is, I don't want that. I want to stay in a haunted house. I don't want to smell something that's going to make me want to throw up.